Okie dokie. Sorry about the late start. Um, Stuff got ahead of me. C'est la vie. That's the way it be. But here we are. Man, I really hope I can see it from over there. That would be good. Let me try switching those. Maybe I'll be able to see them. So yeah, welcome back to probably the second to last installment of Hellburner by CJ Cherryh, which will also wrap up the duology of Heavy Time and Hellburner, which has the whole cast, this whole cast in it. I know it was collected in an omnibus edition called Devil to the Belt. I've shown the cover of that as a background image before on this, for both this and Heavy Time. And that pretty much wraps up this. There's probably a proper name for this duology, but we'll call it Devil to the Belt. Um, it is not the end of the story for the universe at large, but it's the end of the this cast of characters story basically. You'll have allusions to some of them. Mazian is not. Mazian's important here, but he's not really a character. Um, he's doing all this background stuff. You'll hear references to his name. He's even more important in Down Below Station, which is, I would contend, kind of the natural next novel, proper novel. There are some short stories that take place roughly in between this point of time and then, I literally just read it this year. What is it called? Merchanter's Luck. Yeah, it's got to be Merchanter's Luck, which is really good. I dig it. In fact, I dig it so much I'd be tempted to read it, and it gives you a a fairly interesting look at a how these merchanters are living their lives, and b what the situation is like right now uh, out beyond Earth's orbit. And how, just kind of the general sense of political tensions. I kind of wish there were something similar time frame wise for Union. I'm not sure that there is. You have stuff that's way post Down Below Station on Cytine. I say way, it's a couple years. Um, but I don't think there's anything that too explicitly. Well, I guess 40,000 at Gehenna would probably count. Um, yeah, 40,000 at Gehenna probably counts, but it's not really a like Union factors in because they're the instigators of a certain incident. That is kind of the driving force behind the book, but it's not really um, it's not about Union per se. Although there's a lot of details you can glean from it that explain, okay, this is kind of what Union is doing, and this is in some ways why they're considered the issue they are. Um, all right, so Hellburner. Previously on Hellburner, Vegeta finally got the 7 Dragon Balls. Uh, Geez, I don't remember. Uh, it's been an entire week, dude. I don't know. Basically, Dekker is under pressure upon pain of death slash brain slavery uh, to get results for Porey with his team because Dekker has indicated that he is indeed hot shit. Um, he's a hot shot. And he claims he can do so damn well. He claims he can run this course that killed guy who's dead now, as well as his previous team, whose name is eluding me at this very moment in time. I see the name and I'll recognize it. I can tell you that. Shoot, I'm having a hard time. Don't mind me. So he's under pressure. Wilhelmsen, that was his name, and he took out the rest of Dekker's team that was flying this vehicle. through its very high-paced course. But now Dekker has Meg Cady, Sal Abujib, and Ben Pollard doing work, and Ben has basically said, you know what, we're all in the wrong positions. We need to do this differently. Um, Dekker is not a born leader. He does not do the leadership thing. I'm doing it. Lead follower, get out of the way. Um, Sal Abujib, you get to be gunnery. You get to shoot things. I forget what Meg's doing. Dekker is the hotshot pilot. It's or is it Meg is going to be the leader? I don't remember now. Whatever. It all becomes clear. It will all become clear probably. In any case, Graff is out here and he's like, man, what's going on? Like what? Like clearly we're gearing up for something big as an organization, fleet and Earth. But like what? What? Why? You know what? Yes, yes, he did choke up in the ship. So yeah, that's right. Thank you, a optical antenna. So Dekker basically chokes. Um, well, he lets the team blame themselves until they realize that they didn't necessarily make any mistakes. And like he blames himself more than anyone. Like he's taking it hard, but he's like too exhausted to say no, I'm crap. And he's also concerned how that's going to affect them and their team cohesion because if they're like, oh, well, we can't trust you because you're not necessarily going to do it. So he's under a lot of pressure. Dekker is under a ton of pressure, and he doesn't do super great under pressure. Like he has a tendency to have difficulty, like buckle under the strain. Like he can perform under pressure, but man, it's either he performs really well under pressure or he buckles completely and asks what time it is. Which will drive Ben completely stark. It is fascinating though to watch Ben kind of how much he's changed as a character since Morey Bird died in the last book, and how he's like, man, maybe Morey had some, he basically tries to be less of a narcissistic sociopath, I guess. So he like tries to understand people. He tries, he's a lot nicer towards Dekker. I mean, he still will try to throttle him most of the time, but he understands at least. He kind of gets it. So it's pretty fascinating. This book is kind of like, in a lot of ways, it's kind of payoff, I guess. Payoff for the previous book. All right, I've spent like 7 minutes yammering, so I'm going to get right down to it. This will be the second to last installment. I'm going to get roughly halfway from here to the end of the book. Ooh, excuse me. I'm drinking water very loudly. Um, where are you? Where's the next chapter? Okay, so yeah, we definitely get to chapter 17 at least. How long is the chapter after that? And I'm late. Let's get to well, yeah, but then the last installment winds up being microscopic. Yeah, so we'll get about halfway through the remainder of the book, and then the rest we'll do next week. So it's not going to be a super long stream today. It's probably only going to be like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. But I keep you wanting more. That's just how it's shaken out. Alrighty. As for what I'm going to do after this, probably short stories. Then I've got like a 2 week break, and then honestly, I'm probably going to do Under Pressure by Frank Herbert or Starfish by Peter Watts. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I've got a lot of possibles. Got a lot of cool stuff that I want to do. A lot of cool stuff. Chapter 15. Shouting in Porey's office again. Dekker sat on the bench outside, between a couple of Marine guards, and stared at the opposite wall, acutely aware of the traffic in the main corridor, people stealing glances in this direction. You got a feeling for notoriety and disaster, and you knew when you'd achieved it. Wake up to a stand down and a see me from Graff, who had nothing to tell him, except that somehow the aptitudes in his unit were skewed, that they wanted to see Ben and Sal back in testing, and Graff was due in a meeting with Porey immediately. Which left him here, in the hall, listening to war going on in the office, and he hoped it didn't aim at Graff. Mutiny in the Shepherd ranks, if that was the case. Graff was the only point of reason in their lives since the disaster of the last test. And, personally, he wanted to kill Porey. They told him he was supposed to go fight rebels from a planet clear to hell and gone away from Earth, and right now the targets he most wanted were Commander Edmund Porey and whoever had screwed up Ben and Sal, if that was what had happened. Something crashed inside the office. He tried not to twitch, found his hands locked, white-knuckled. The guards exchanged looks, dead expressionless. Marines weren't anxious to go in there either. Weights rang back down into the pad, and Meg collapsed on her back on the bench, nerve dead. Patterns still danced behind her eyeballs. Eyelids, not behind her eyeballs. Patterns still danced behind her eyelids, but the adrenaline was gone. It was only phosphenes. Message came from the lieutenant, and Deck had been outright shaking when he'd read it. Bad shakes. Thank God Ben had done whatever Ben had done. Sal was close-mouthed on it. But she had the idea it involved last night, phones, and messages Deck would have highly disapproved. Weights banged close to her head. Her eyelids flew open. Mitch was standing over her. Hell of a start, even if he was decorative. The son of a bitch. She had as little to do with Mitch as possible. Ben and Sal had gotten called in to testing. Deck... What's this about Dekker getting scrubbed? Mitch wasn't alone. The other traffic in the gym wasn't casual. A delegation gathered around. Paulie, Franklin, Wilson, Basrami, Shepherds, all of them on her case. Shit, she thought, and sat up, looking for a way to shut this action down. Maybe you better ask the lieutenant. I don't know. Word is there was a fight last night. Double shit. Damned thin walls. Wasn't any fight. A discussion. That's our business. Paulie said. Discussion that scrubs a crow? Basrami said. Word is the lieutenant gave him a mandatory stand down. The lieutenant's been climbing all over testing. Saito's still there with Porey's comm chief. Now the lieutenant's talking with Porey and Deck's hanging outside with the guards. Doesn't look arrested, but he doesn't look happy. More information than she'd had. The grapevine in this place was efficient, except in her vicinity. Mitch asked, So what's going on, Katie? All I know, she said, we got the stand down before we went to breakfast. They wanted Ben, they wanted Sal and Teston, they wanted Dekker in Porey's office. They didn't want me, so I came here to blow it off. Come off it, Katie. It's the truth. I don't know a damn thing except Deck's been severely pushing it. Could be a medical stand down. I hope to hell it's a medical. Porey's been on his back. He hasn't said, but we screwed a sim. He talked to Porey, and he's hard since. Run hard since, sorry. And he's run hard since. You want to tell me? Silence from the guys. Then Mitch said, They giving any of this special tape to him? Nasty question. Not that I hear. I don't think so. Nah, there's been no time like that in his schedule. Are they going to? Scary question. Him? They don't need to, do they? He knows what he's doing. Just asking, Mitch said. Yeah, she said. Well, whose would they give to him? Tell me that. 5 on 10, they made the same and only guess she could, and the idea scared hell out of her. They took my mates into testing. They told Deck report in. They didn't tell me an effing thing. I'm either the only one right in the universe, or I must be one of the problems. Which shaded closer to her private anxiety than she wanted. She got up, picked up her towel for the showers. So if you got any news, you owe me.
Nothing, Polly said, except a serious concern for the program. And Dekker.
Belters rarely said friend. You didn't say, I care, I love, I give a damn. They wouldn't do that. But they came asking. Even that scuzz Mitch. Made her think halfway better of Mitch, and that gave her another cause to worry. Yeah, she said. Thanks. If I hear anything either. There we go. The door opened. Graff said, stone-faced, "The commander wants to see you." "Yes, sir," Dekker said. No questions. Graff was negotiating with an unreasoning, unreasonable son of a bitch, and didn't need trouble from another source. He got up and walked in, saluted, and Porey said, all too quietly, "You may have had a problem, mister. This whole damn program may have a problem. So I want an answer. I want a single, completely straight answer. If you were second-guessing the aptitudes, where would you have expected Pollard and Abujib to fit in the crew profile?" "Ensign Pollard's a computer tech, theory stuff." He had one sudden chance, maybe, to do something for Ben, which would drop the lot of them down the list, break Meg's heart, and save all their skins. He debated a split second, then, UDC Technical Institute. I'd have thought he'd be handling the computers. To be honest, sir, I'd have thought he'd go somewhere up in fleet ops. They were going to send him to Stockholm. He's got... Porey snarled, "We've got enough UDC hands in this operation right now. What about Abujib? Co-pilot?" He didn't know what all this was about. Not enough to maneuver with. Ben taught her numbers. I'd expect she's good. Long scan or arms comp. She's... He flashed on Sal's frustration with the scan assignment. I don't know. Don't know. What she wants is the fire button. His mind was on what Porey had said about Ben. He thought he might have done Ben harm, bringing in the Stockholm business. He made a desperate, uninvited counter. "Sir, I haven't got any doubts about Ben Pollard. He went UDC because they had his program, but he's a belter. He wouldn't do anything but 100% for his partners." Porey left a cold, cold silence. He didn't know what he was arguing for or against, or who was on trial. Porey just stared. "If," Porey began, and the phone beeped. Porey grabbed up the handset, snarled, "This is a conference, damn you!" And the face went expressionless while Dekker had time to think. Something's happened. Graff was paying the same kind of attention. Porey said, "Procedures. Stat. Estimate. Estimate," and looked grim as he hung up and stood up. "Pods hung." God. Dekker thought Porey wanted the door, grabbed for the switch. "Dekker!" "I can help, sir." "No!" Porey said, and there was no argument. Meg hauled clothes on, still wet. Damn sweater hung on an earring. She finessed it loose the painful way and got her head through. Mitch, the scuzz, was standing in the locker room door. She jerked the sweater down. "Getting your thrills, Mitch?" "Serious talk, Katie. Question. Couple of touchy questions. Private, the man wanted. Hell of a way to get it. And time was, Mitch didn't get 2 seconds. But Mitch didn't look like trouble. Mitch looked like business, and curiosity was killing her. "So? Give."
What is their damn hurry with Deck? Do you get any feel?
She bit her lip, shook her head. Neg, no. What are you asking?
Is Ben on our side?
Absolute. No question. And Sal and I fly with him. Mitch ducked his head, looked up with the straightest eye contact she'd ever had out of him.
Ben made a phone call last night. Deck got pulled this morning. You know about that?
Yeah, Ben could have slipped it to the lieutenant. About 2 jumps ahead of me, if you want the truth.
That schedule of his, did he set it? Is it his choice? Or is Porey doing it?
Much as I know, it's his schedule. It was sensitive territory. She wasn't sure she wanted to discuss any crew business with Mitch, who was Deck's competition in this place. But Deck had her scared to hell. That was what she had said to Sal, and that was what made her confess now. I can believe Ben might have stopped him. I just hope it didn't land either of them in trouble.
Second touchy question. You apparently aren't too damn bad. How much of it do you think is tape?
I was good before I came here, mister.
Mitch held up a hand. No offense. Straight Q&A. They're talking about shoving it on the rest of us. I want to know from the ones that know. Does that damn thing really work?
Sounded like an honest question. Different way to learn, same way you guys learn, what I hear, this neural input stuff. I don't know what's the difference, except we trank deeper, by what I hear. How could I tell? I don't get the other kind.
Rumor is they're running you guys up to mission level sims. They're saying they're using you guys for guinea pigs because you came in cold, as far as these boards. That if it works with you, we're next, and we got no choice. Now they're hauling Pollard and Abogin back into testing? Makes the rest of us damn nervous, Katie.
Made her nervous when he put it that way.
You know anything about Pete Fowler? You know anything about Pete Fowler? Have you ever have any weird feelings off that stuff?
I'm not being him, Mitch. I'm not any damn dead guy. That's not what's going on.
He was 29. He was a good, fast thinker. He was regular for Ellie Saunders. She was the long scanner. You want any more? Pete's faults, his virtues? I can tell you. He was a nitpicking sumbitch about the checklist.
I'm telling you, I don't know anything about Pete Fowler. I damn sure haven't got a fix on Sal, and I always was a stickler for doing. Mitch! Somebody yelled out in the Sims. They got a pod hung!
Oh, shit,
Mitch said, and he was running. She started running after him, scared as hell, no idea what they could do, why they were going. But it was somebody she knew in that damn thing, and she moved. What's the status? Porey asked, leaning over a tech. Security ops had 8 monitors, and 4 of them were black, except for green letters showing Core 21. That was the Sims area. Anybody who worked up there knew that section, and Dekker knew it. Made a guess what those black monitors showed before Porey got his answer. They cut the power, sir, the ops tech said. Chief Jackson got the spin shut down. Cameras are working, they're on another generator, but all the pods are full crewed and frozen out there till they get the power back on. The core was totally dark, even the access areas. Requests for personnel movement going out over comm. The same sequence that must have attended his own accident, Dekker thought glumly. Like standing off and watching it happen to him. Like standing off and watching it happen to him. There we go. Emphasis on the right syllable. Do we have a recovery team out there? Porey asked. And the tech answered that they were still trying to organize that. Only way they had to haul you back if a pod had to totally crash was to suit up and go out there. The construction workers that formed the rescue squad were coming in from their off hours and from work around the carrier. Too damned long, he said. If he didn't care, he was. Oh, sorry, no, that's Dekker.
Too damn long, he said. He didn't care if he was out of turn. I know the system, sir. I'm used to a suit.
You're not going out there, Porey said, and adjusted the comm in his ear, scowling, eyes showing the least anxiety while he listened to something elsewhere. You have one? He asked someone invisible. Suiting now? They'd found somebody closer. Dekker drew a controlled breath, then, still wanting to do something. But rescue was evidently getting into motion. Black monitors. No emergency lights. The fool engineers had put the viewport shutters on the main power. Power was cut. Completely. Complete black in the chamber. No ventilation in the pod. No heat. No filtration for anybody out there. God hope the mags weren't all crashed. Patch through the suit comm, Porey said. Graff said to the tech at the boards in simulation control, Give us audio here. Are we getting anything out of the pod? We don't get anything. The whole core section's on that generator. What the hell kind of engineering is that? Damn it to bloody hell! What kind of operation do we have here? An old one, Graff said. Lots of patch jobs. Piece of junk, Porey muttered. Nothing moves, does it? Not the shutters, not the internal lights. There's a requisition to get them on another circuit, but the engineers have found a problem doing that. Can they power up with the rest of those pods sitting out there? Should be able to, Graff said, while Dekker kept his mouth shut. Should be able to, once they got the pod clear. If it didn't, if they were all crashed, everybody was in trouble. Imminent trouble. One man's not enough out there, he said tautly. They've got no locators. Those are all killed with the power. Sir, in all respect, I know what I'm doing. Shut down, Dekker. You're not going up there. A dim seam of light showed at the edge of one monitor. Lock door, he figured, on a leech and a hand battery. Audio cut in, unmistakably a suit comm, heavy breathing, little else, and a white star appeared in both monitors. Suit spot shining in all that black. Sim Chief's voice then.
You're going across the chamber, zenith climb about 90 meters. Sensor range within. Copy that.
Female voice, unexpectedly. Familiar voice that sent a sinking feeling to the pit of his stomach as the star shot off at a fair speed. Scary speed. Oh.
Copy that.
There we go.
Don't hurry it. Don't hurry it. From the chief. Damn it, slow down.
Meg didn't. Meg was hot-dogging it, scaring hell out of him and the sim chief. Minor show-out, but habitual. A miner knew his distance without his eyes, by reckonings they didn't teach in construction, and she wouldn't miss. Blind in the dark, she wouldn't miss. That was the push she was used to, and she was counting and calking. Shouldn't argue with her, Dekker muttered, sweating it. She knows her rate. She's feeling it. Tell the chief that. Is that Katie? Graff asked. Dekker, is that Katie out there? Yes, sir. Get her the hell out of there, Porey said into the mic. This is Commander Porey. Get her out of there. Now! Took a little relaying of instructions. Meg developed a problem with her mic. Didn't fool Porey, didn't fool anybody, but there wasn't a thing Porey could do from here. Meg was closing into sensor range. You could hear the pings on audio and see the rate drop. Then number 2 monitor showed a faint haze of detail. Chamber wall and a pod directly in Meg's suit spot. He'd bet his life on it. She's all right, he said, feeling the shakes himself. Sir, she knows her business. Porey wasn't saying a thing about the transmission difficulties, wasn't giving any orders now. He just muttered, Katie's on notice with me. You make that clear, Mr. Graff. Yes, sir, Graff said. Word came from another channel that the pod rescue unit was being deployed. At least some of the rescue squad had gotten there, and was launching the track-guided equipment that could tow the pod. Meanwhile, an engineer was giving instructions, and Meg started identifying and freeing up the bolts that released it from its track.
Shit!
Came over the comm and froze his heart.
What's the matter?
The chief asked, but he could see it for himself. The pod's number decal. Number 3. The pod they'd been scheduled for. "That's Jamil," he said to whoever cared, and looked for a chair free. But there wasn't one. "Jamil and his guys took our slot. Said they could use the time." Didn't take much calc to find a lighted, open hatch, and Meg beelined for it, braked, and took a shaky bent-kneed impact, another show-out minor trick, with a hand-up catch at the rim of the lock to stop the rebound. She cycled the lock on battery power, breath hissing with shivers. It wasn't cold coming through the suit, not this fast. It was shock starting to work, in the loneliness of the airlock. Let the rescue crew do the maneuvering with the PRU, the chief had said. They wanted her out of there and that lock shut before they powered up the mags, and she agreed. She didn't know shit about the tow system. It was on now, it was moving, bound for a pod access lock where meds were waiting, and they weren't going to need her unless the mags were definitively crashed. Moment of intense claustrophobia then, just the ghostly emergency light. Then a door opened into a brightly lit ready room full of guys willing to help with the suit. She got the helmet off, drew a breath of icy clean air, and got a first welcome bit of news. Power-up was proceeding. Pods were answering. They for sure weren't going to need her again out there. She could unsuit and take the lift out to gravity levels and the lockers. Good job, they told her. Good job. But they were busy, and she got herself out of the way, let them tend the suit, unaccustomed luxury for a minor jock, and boarded the lift out of there. Slow, slow business in the recovery of the pod, and they could only watch in one deck security ops. Dekker hung at Graff's back and Porey's, listened to the output from the rescue team on the open speaker. They were working into dock now, at Access 3.
That's copy.
He heard a voice say, and flashed on cold, on dark, on inertia gone wild. "Enjoy the ride, Dekker." "That's him," he said of a sudden, had everyone's attention, and he looked to Graff, who understood what he meant. Graff surely understood. "ID that man," Graff snapped. "Isolate that voice. Mr. Dekker," as he headed for the door. "Hold it." "Dekker," Porey said, atop Graff's order, but he'd already stopped and faced them. "I want you to listen," Graff said. "I want you to pick out that voice, all the voices that might be involved." "Is he meaning the attack on him?" Porey wanted to know, and Graff nodded, leaning over the master comm in ops. "Yes, sir, that's exactly what he means. Play it back, Ensign."
That's copy.
The recording said, among others, and Dekker said with absolute conviction, "Yes, that one." "Who's carted to that area right now?" Porey asked. Nobody's leaving that area without carting out, hear me?" "Yes, sir," the Comtech said, and relayed to fleet security. "Not everybody's carted in," Graff said. "They probably let medics and techs in wholesale. Anybody with a security badge." "Sir," the tech said, "I think I've got it pinned. That output's on ECOM. I've got the serial number on the suit." "Track it." Time to indulge the shakes and the unsteady breathing, alone in the lift.
They're getting telemetry.
Meg heard, on the comm track that was probably going out to every speaker in the mast.
4 heartbeats. best news yet. Thank God, she thought, queasy in the steady increase of G against the deep, fast dive the car was taking. She clenched her teeth and collected herself, watched the level indicator light watched the level indicator light plummet until the car came to rest, and the door opened on warm air and bright light. She expected Mitch and a handful of guys, but the room was packed, everybody who could cram themselves in, all wanting news. 4 heartbeats, she told them, which they might have heard. She couldn't tell if the comm was feeding through. There was so much racket. She wasn't prepared to be laid hold of, wasn't expecting Mitch, of all guys, to pat her heavily on the shoulder and say how minor jocks had their use. Other guys did the same, and all she could get out was a breathless, desperate, Jamil took our sim slot. Anybody seen Deck? Nobody had. She was shaking, embarrassing herself with that fact, but she couldn't stop the chill now. A big guy, whose name she didn't even know, threw his arm around her shoulders, hugged her against his side, and yelled out to get a blanket. She was soaked with sweat. I'm all right, she tried to say, but her teeth kept chattering. Seeing that number out there had put a shock reaction into her. She wasn't used to shaking. Wasn't used to time to think when she was scared, or, worst, to knowing there wasn't a damned thing she could do personally to help those guys or Deck. The blanket came around her. Tried to kill us, she said between shivers. Wasn't any fucking accident. Deck was supposed to be in that pod. That was our slot Jamil took. Sims Tech Eldon A. Kent, Graff said, reading the monitor. Out of Munich, trained in Bonn. I want a piece of him, Dekker said. God, he wanted it. Wanted to pound the son of a bitch so fine the law wouldn't have pieces left to work with. Just let me find him. Certainly answers the questions about access, Graff murmured, reading over the data on the monitor. Free access to the pods, a lot of techs let each other through, never mind the rules. He's Lendler Corp. He comes and goes. What were you doing up there suited, Dekker? What were you doing with the mission tape? Peace suddenly clicked into place. Bad memory. Whole chunk of memory. Wanted to look at the tape. Just wanted to look at it. The disaster sequence. The maneuver Wilhelmsen had failed to make. Damned set piece. They wanted it to work. They kept training us for specifics. I told them that. They. The UDC. Villy. So you went to the ready room or up to the access? The ready room. To run it on the machine there. They wouldn't let me in the labs. I was off duty. I just wanted to look at the sequence. Where did this Kent come in? Porey asked. While I was running the tape. Alone? He shook his head. Guy was with him. I know the face. I can't remember the name. And they came in while you were reading the tape. And they came in while you were reading the tape. What did they say? They said they were checking out the pods. They were looking for some possible problem in the Sims. They wanted me to go up to the chamber and answer some questions. Graff asked, Did you suit to fly? Was that your intention? I I hadn't. No. I just had the coveralls. I hadn't brought a coat. You suited because of the cold, you mean? Yes, sir. You went up there, Porey said. What happened? They said put the tape in. I did that. They hit me on the back. They hit me from the back. Said, enjoy the ride. Sir, I want these guys. Absolutely not, Porey said. You don't go after them. That's an order, mister. Commander, they're up there right now with Jamil and his guys. They've got their asses to cover. Mr. Dekker. They're with Jamil! Mr. Dekker, shut up and believe there are reasons more important than your personal opinion. We have a program with problems, a ship with problems. And what happened to you and what happened up there isn't the only thing at issue. They're Lendler Corp technicians, and they didn't take a spontaneous dislike to you. Do you read that, Mr. Dekker? Lendler Corp has a multitude of fleet contracts, which has UDC contracts, which leaves us with serious questions, Mr. Dekker. Does it penetrate your consciousness that there may be issues that have a much wider scope than your need for vengeance or my personal preferences? If things were otherwise, I'd turn you loose. As is, you keep your mouth shut. You keep it shut on this and let security handle it. We'll get them. It may take time, but we'll get them. We want to know whether there's a network. We want to know if there's any damage we don't know about. We want to know if there is a connection to you personally, or if you just have incredible luck. Do you understand that, Mr. Dekker? Yes, sir, he said, past a choking anger. Yes, sir, I understand that. Then you see you keep your mouth totally shut about what you know. You don't even tell your crew. And believe me, I mean that. Mr. Graff, sir, escort Mr. Dekker to my office. I'm not through with him. Walk slowly, Graff said on the way out of ops. Porey was back there on comm, calling in senior security. He was well sure. Fleet Police already had the Pod 3 access as secured as it could be with medics at work. They had the answer they'd been looking for, and the mess only got wider, with tentacles into God knew what, Lendler, any other corporation. You didn't take a highly educated technical worker and suddenly turn him into a saboteur and hand-to-hand murderer. Not overnight, you didn't. Which meant Kent was other than a peaceful citizen. Kent was skilled and malicious, and somebody in Lendler Corp had gotten him credentials and arranged for him either to get here or to stay here. At the time, a lot of Lendler Corp had transferred out. Porey was right on this one. They had, as Villy was fond of saying, pulled a string and got a snake. Potential faults in the equipment, faults in the programming, faults in the assignments, and Porey still hadn't closed on the monumental coincidence of his pulling Dekker from the test today in the first place. Why he'd had sudden misgivings on this day of all days. The message that had turned up in his personal file, with no identifying header or record, damned sure hadn't been a spontaneous generation of the EIDAT system. And his stomach was increasingly upset, with guilt over the concealment of that security breach, and the conviction exactly who had inserted that message, along with a cluster of testing labs files nobody outside highest security clearances should have been able to access at all. Bias in the tests, Earth cultural bias in the aptitudes, consequently in the choices and reactions trained into the UDC and the Shepard enlistees. A bias that didn't want aggression on the fire button or command decisions out of the pilots. He'd only to run an eye down the questions being asked and the weight given certain answers to see what was happening. And before the accident, phone calls had already been flying back and forth between Sol 1 and B Dock. Porey had already invoked military emergency on Intellitron in as fine a shade of contract clause as a merchanter could manage, demanding access to programs Intellitron had held secret thus far. Pending mission. Medical question. Emergency. Credit Edmund for the nerve of a dockside lawyer. And meanwhile, aside from the possibility of active sabotage, they had to wonder how many other examples of misassigned crews they were going to find. They had a clear notion why the UDC crews had had problems, and knew, thanks to Pollard, why the whole program might have a serious problem, which he couldn't, for Pollard's sake, confess. Friendliest Edmund Porey had ever been to him, after he'd broken the news and Porey had absorbed it. And, damn it, he didn't want Porey's kind of friendship. He didn't want Porey deciding he could help Porey look good, and putting in a request for him on staff, God help him, even if it meant a promotion. Not at that price. And it looked that way now. It looked increasingly that way, with no word from his own captain, no evidence Q was still in charge over at FSO. Be careful, Dima had told him last night. Don't succeed too conspicuously. Mr. Dekker. A breath. Yes, sir? Coincidence in this instance is remotely possible. Yes, sir. You don't believe it. No, sir, I absolutely don't. You're probably asking yourself why you were so lucky, why I pulled you from tests. Another breath. Maybe Dekker hadn't gotten that far. Maybe Dekker was still tracking on the past, pulling up damaged memory. Maybe Dekker was thinking of revenge, or Porey, or the multitudinous accesses corporate connivance could infiltrate that a fleet pilot wasn't educated to suspect. The reason I did pull you, we found a bias in the aptitudes. I'm telling you something that's classified to the hilt, understand? If it gets to the barracks the wrong way, with no fix, it could affect performance. Fatally. You understand me? We're on a knife's edge here right now. We don't need loose talk, on any topic. A worried glance. Yes, sir. I'm telling you this because I suspect one of your crew made the discovery and communicated it to me, secretly, which is also not for general consumption. And when the commander briefs you, don't let him know you know either. How, I heard, could bring one of your crew before a court-martial. Do I make myself absolutely clear on that? Yes, sir. Dekker's voice was all but inaudible. The public story has to be that, having experience with this ship, we're going to be reevaluating certain crews for reassignment. Break crews? Is that what we're talking about? Damnable question. Touchy question, considering the Wilhelmsen disaster. He paused in the corridor short of Marine guards outside Porey's office. Outside their audio pickup, he hoped, or their orders to eavesdrop on an officer. Not by fiat. I'm asking for any crews who might want assignments reevaluated, in the light of new data. No breakup of existing crews unless there's a request from inside the crew. We recognize, believe me, we recognize the psychological investments you have. Why in hell? Dekker caught a breath, asked in bewildered, betrayed tones. Why didn't you catch it before this? Mr. Dekker, when we began this program, in an earlier, naive assumption of welcome here, we trusted the UDC to know Sol mindsets better than we did. We were absolutely wrong. We didn't understand the prejudice involved against the people we most needed. And your crew is the most foreign to their criteria, more so than the Shepherds. Maybe that explains how it turned up with your group. But what I've told you can't go any further. Hear me? Dekker drew a shaky breath. Yes, sir. I have to take your word, Mr. Dekker. Or, understand me, court-martial Ben Pollard. I'm giving you a 2-day stand-down, Mr. Dekker, Porey said. The friendliest Dekker had ever seen the man. The quietest he'd ever imagined him. It still didn't include warmth. I don't want you near the labs for 48 hours. Graff said, from the side of the room, I'd recommend longer. Frown from Porey, who rocked back in the desk chair. We haven't got longer. You have a mother a great deal in the news. Which you know. You may not know there's a special bill proceeding through a You may not know there's a special bill proceeding through a JLC committee that requires the military to surrender personnel indicted for major crimes. Are you aware of that, Mr. Dekker? Does that concern you? A complete shift of attack. Another assault on memory. Sometimes he thought he lost things. My mother, sir. He's not gotten the headlines, Graff said. His schedule's been non-stop for days. Your mother, Mr. Dekker, has a battery of very expensive peacer lawyers. Your mother is a cause that's burned a police station in Denmark and gotten a Mars Corp chartered jet, there we go, grounded in Dallas on a bomb threat. Do you know that? No, he didn't. He shook his head, and Porey went on. The whole damn planet's on its ear. There's a lot of pressure on the legislative committee, and you're essential personnel, mister. Your crew is an essential, high-tech experiment that, through no particular fault of yours, has taken a direct hit from a damnably persistent woman and a nest of lying political fools in the UDC who are in bed and fornicating with the politicians who appointed them to their posts, the same politicians who are fornicating with the shadow parliament and the peacers in Geneva. That bill is a piece of currency in this game. We have to avoid you becoming another piece of currency in this affair, a damned media circus if they extradite you, and that means getting anything done with this project has assumed a sudden, certain urgency. Do you follow me? He saw the lieutenant out of the tail of his eye. Graff wasn't looking at him. Hadn't told him. God, how much else had Graff kept from him? How much else had Graff kept from him? How much else? It is an italicized word. Bleh. God, how much else had Graff kept from him? Porey said, We're talking about a fault in the aptitudes, and I want your well-considered opinion here, Mr. Dekker, whether you want to go... Whoa. And I want your well-considered opinion here, Mr. Dekker, whether you want a go with as is. Okay. So we're going to dissect this particular paragraph, probably, because there's almost everything here. I do that almost every stream now. It's kind of sad. I want your well-considered opinion here, Mr. Dekker, whether you want a go with as is, or whether you personally want to make a personnel switch. Both your crew members are demonstrably capable in the seats they've trained for. But capable is a fragile substance in a Hellburner crew, do you understand me? Yes, sir, he managed to say. Extremely well. Pollard and Abujib? Exactly. Can I talk to them? uh, okay, so I want to talk about this previous paragraph real quick before I continue, because it's a great one. So this has almost every piece of punctuation in the book, and I love it. Okay, so Porey said, comma, quote, major quote, we're talking about a fault in the aptitudes, comma, and I want your well-considered opinion here, comma, Mr. Dekker, comma. Whether you want a go-with as-is, comma, or whether you personally want to make a personnel switch, period. Italicized, both. Unitalicized, your crew members are demonstrably capable in the seats they've trained for, long hyphen. But, small quote, capable, small quote, as in quotes within a quotation, is a fragile substance in a Hellburner crew, comma, you understand me, question mark, end quote? So, it's quite a paragraph. All right, back on track. Porey said, We're talking about a fault in the aptitudes, and I want your well-considered opinion here, Mr. Dekker, whether you want to go with as is, or whether you personally want to make a personnel switch. Both your crewmates are demonstrably capable in the seats they've trained for, but capable is a fragile substance in a Hellburner crew. You understand me?
Yes, sir, he managed to say. Extremely well. Pollard and Abujib?
Exactly.
Can I talk to them? Thump of Porey's hand on the desk.
You're the pilot! Gut decision! Which?
An answer fell out. I'd ask them, sir.
Correct answer, Graff muttered, looking at the floor. Hard to argue with Porey. Hard to think in Porey's vicinity. But there was Graff. Graff agreed with him. Graff handed him secrets that could mean Graff's own career. And Graff had failed his promise to tell him if there was news from Sol 1. Porey said, Then we'll put the decision up to them, since that's where you want it. No preferences. You've lost one crew. Let's see if this one's worth the investment. Meanwhile, Mr. Dekker, do some thinking about your own responsibilities, like executive decisions. Do you make executive decisions, Mr. Dekker?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember your instructions regarding what you've seen and heard?
Yes, sir.
What are they?
Silence, sir.
A hesitation. A cold, cold glance, as if he were a morsel on Porey's plate. Then a casual wave of the hand. Dismissed. 2-day stand down.
Yes, sir.
Anger choked him of a sudden, out of what reserve of feeling he wasn't sure. But it wasn't at Graff. He refused at gut level to believe Graff had deliberately lied to him. The service had. The out-of-reach authorities had, and not for the first time in his life. He saluted, turned, and reached for the door. Mr. Dekker, Graff said, from the side of the room. Excuse me, sir. Mr. Dekker, outside a moment.
Yes, sir.
He wasn't enthusiastic. He didn't want to talk. But Graff followed him outside, between the guards. Mr. Dekker, I failed a promise. Do you want the information on your mother's whereabouts? He nodded. Couldn't talk. He was acutely conscious of the guards on either hand, and Graff steered him well down the corridor, toward the corner, before he stopped. Your mother is on Earth at the moment. Everything funded by the Civil Liberty Association, as far as we can tell.
Why?
The peace movement finds the case useful. The Federation of Man, for starters. As I warned you might happen. There is a financial connection between certain of these organizations, the CRA, the Greens, and a number of other organizations.
It doesn't make any sense. She's not political.
I'm afraid it's rather well left the original issue. It's the power of the EC that's in question. There have been demonstrations at the company offices in Bonn, in Orlando, Tokyo, Paris. More and more surreal.
I don't believe this.
There's a great deal of pent-up resentment against the company, economic resentments, social resentments. So Saito tells me. Mass population effect. Oh my god, that is 2 colons within 3 words of each other. Thank you, CJ Cherryh. Ah. So Saito tells me. Mass population event. The case came along. It embodied a concept of company wealth and power against a helpless worker. The company is understandably anxious to defuse the situation. They've offered a settlement, but concession seems to have encouraged the opposition. Salazar's plane was forced to land in Dallas because of a bomb threat. That's what the commander was talking about. Whether that was a peace group or a random lunatic, no one knows. I can't overstate the seriousness of what's happening downworld.
She's never been on Earth. She can't have any idea what's going on.
We certainly wish she had decided against going down.
Did she ever call back?
No. My word on that, Mr. Dekker, I swear to you. Most probably her lawyers advised her against it. Most probably, considering who funds them.
I've got to call her. I've got to talk to her.
Reaching her, now, through the battery of bodyguards and security around her, on Earth, I earnestly advise against it. I don't think you can get through that screen. If you do, it's almost certainly going to be monitored, very likely to be placed back on the news, by one side or the other in this affair. God, where is she? Right now, where is she? Bonn, as of this morning. Mazian is in the same city. There are peacer riots and demonstrations. The news services are crawling all over the city. If you want to communicate with her, you just about have to do it through news releases, and it's not the moment for it. We're imminently concerned about this extradition bill getting through. We don't want the maneuvering going public, and it could if you make a move. One believes the legislators One believes the legislators aren't stupid. No one is spelling out to the media what effect the bill will have. No one is saying outright that it's aimed at you in specific. Incredibly, the news services haven't put it together yet, or don't even know about it. It's all proceeding in committee, so far. Salazar publicly making speeches on the fear of some criminal element with a finger on the fire button. Earth is extremely worried about that point. Do they know what we are? Do they understand this ship? The general public knows now it's no missile project. No one believed we could maintain cover after the hearings. Yes, it's leaked what it is. Senatorial aides, company representatives, nobody's sure exactly what, but we're completely public. And the program, with what we've found out in the last 3 hours, is in such disarray that we can't take another round of hearings. The coalition that put command of this facility in our hands is extremely shaky, as I understand it. If political reputations are threatened by the wrong kind of publicity, certain key votes could shift and we could be massacred in the legislative committee. That, aside from your personal welfare, is why the company and fleet command are extremely anxious to stop that bill. Certain citizen lobbies are very fearful of wildcat attacks from the fleet provoking a military strike at Earth, and even knowing it's a certain faction in MarsCorp pushing that bill, certain key senators desperately need a success in this program to play against it, or they can't, politically, stand the heat of standing against the bill. That is a hell of a paragraph, and I may have to reread it because I muffed the cadence. Blech. There is a lot to dissect there, so I am going to reread that. Sorry. Do they know what we are? Do they understand this ship? The general public knows now it's no missile project. No one believed we could maintain cover after the hearings. Yes, it's leaked what it is. Senatorial aides, company representatives, nobody's sure exactly what, but we're completely public. And the program, with what we've found out in the last 3 hours, is in such disarray we can't take another round of hearings. The coalition that put command of this facility in our hands is extremely shaky, as I understand it. If political reputations are threatened by the wrong kind of publicity, certain key votes could shift, and we could be massacred in the legislative committee. That, aside from your personal welfare, is why the company and fleet command are extremely anxious to stop that bill. Certain citizen lobbies are very fearful of wildcat attacks from the fleet provoking a military strike at Earth. And even knowing it's a certain faction in MarsCorp that's pushing that bill, certain key senators desperately need a success in this program to play against it, or they can't, politically, stand the heat of standing against the bill. What do they want from us? I'm not a criminal. Jamil and his crew aren't criminals. I want to know who's trying to kill me that doesn't fucking care if they get my crew killed along with me. Nobody's going to do a damn thing about those guys that did this, are they? Are they, sir? Keep your voice down. The guards have audio. We don't even know at this point that it wasn't a simple mechanical. Those systems have been under heavy use. But I'll grant you we don't think that's the case. That's one problem. And I'll tell you between us and no further, I had a real moment of doubt at the outset whether to make an issue of the aptitudes with your crew or to let it ride the way it was. The temptation to let it stand and save this program was one more major setback. Whoa, whoops. The temptation to let it stand and save this program one more major setback was almost overwhelming. But I know, and I think you know, this system is operationally too sensitive and strategically too critical to accept half right. I hate what happened to Jamil. I wish I'd ordered a general stand down. But hindsight's cheap. As it is, the pod sims are in stand down. We've got a question of other sabotage possible. What you've given us is very valuable. But we're running short of time to develop a case, and we're going to have to find answers for a pack of legislators. It's dead certain. Right now, I don't want you to think about any of this. I want you to take the stand down, get a night's sleep, and remember what you know is dangerously sensitive. Do you understand me on that point? Yes, sir. I have confidence in you, Graff said, turned and walked him back to the Marine guards. Corporal, one of you take Mr. Dekker where he wants to go. Get him what he needs. I suggest it's a beer, Mr. Dekker. I strongly suggest it's a beer. Tell Galley I said so. Check with me if they quibble. Yes, sir, the Marine said. This way, sir. Beer, sir, the guard said, had even gotten it for him and brought it to him at a table back in the galley, quiet refuge in a flurry of cooks and a clatter of pans around them. And in consideration of the rules around this place, and politeness, and the damned regulations, Dekker shoved the kid's hand back across the table with, "Sip, at least. Where I come from, fair's fair." "No, sir," the corporal said, and shoved the beer into his hand. "We can any evening, and you guys can't, and damn, you guys earn it." Misted him up. He'd had no expectation of that, and he hid it in a sip of beer. Guy he didn't know. Young kid who was going to ride that carrier out there with 2,000 other guys and get blown to hell if he made a mistake. Guy's name was Bloomfield, T. And if Graff could have done anything personal for him, he was grateful to the lieutenant for Corporal Bloomfield, who didn't know him, had no personal questions, didn't chatter at him, just let him sip his beer. He felt the alcohol go straight for his bloodstream and his head. After months of abstinence, he was going to be a serious, soft hit. He thought about going back to barracks and catching some sleep. He thought about his crew and Jamil and the guys he knew. And he wanted quiet around him, just quiet, no one to deal with. And when they got to the changes they were going to make in assignments, that wasn't going to happen. He wondered where Meg was, most of all. Finally said to Bloomfield, "You have a comm with you. You think you guys could locate a female about my height, red hair, shave job, fleet uniform?" "That one," Bloomfield said reverently, and kept any remark he might have to himself. "Yes, sir." And got on the comm and said, "This is Bloomfield. Anybody on the comm know where the redhead is?" Remarks came back, evidently. Bloomfield listened to something on the earplug, struggled for a sober face, and asked, looking at him, You want her here, sir?" He managed a laugh. "Tell her it's Paul Dekker asking. Cuts down on casualties." Ain't that the truth? You can practically hear her saying, "Who wants to know?" you know, basically getting ready to fight the entire military establishment. Meg's great.
Chapter 16. You knew it was bad, Mitch put it, and Trez correctly so, Meg thought. Note again, I'm not mispronouncing French. It is with a Z. Très beaucoup, for instance, would be Tres.
But they got their patois, so it's Trez chic. It's Trez correctly so.
You knew it was bad, Mitch put it, and Trez correctly so, Meg thought, when they gave the whole barracks a beer pass, and brought cans and chips into the sacred barracks to boot. Pod sims were severely crashed. Mags could be down a week, if sabotage wasn't the cause, as was the running speculation in the barracks. In which case, plan on longer. Beer helped the mood, though. The ping-pong game got highly rowdy, a couple of arms compers not quite in their best form, but at least everybody was laughing. Word from hospital was guardedly optimistic. The meds weren't talking about life and death with Jamil and the guys now, but how long they'd be in the hospital, about the percentage they could expect to come back, and how soon. Whoops, I thought there was a comma there. I was wrong. Okay. Word from hospital was guardedly optimistic. The meds weren't talking about life and death with Jamil and the guys now, but how long they'd be back in hospital. But weren't. Bleh. Okay, I see my critical failure here. Word from hospital was guardedly optimistic. The meds weren't talking about life and death with Jamil and the guys now, but how long they'd be in hospital, about the percentage they could expect to come back, and how soon. Much better. When you sit down, knuckle under, and focus, it's easy. Jamil was conscious. Trace was. In the ruckus around the table, nobody questioned Ben and Sal slipping late into barracks. Ben just settled down soberly on Deck's other side with, "Heard the news. Bad stuff." What? That's not Ben. "Heard the news. Bad stuff," while Sal went for beers. "Meg pulled them out," Deck said. Got to them fast as anybody alive could. And the sim chief was on fucking duty this time. Didn't have to stop to get fucking Tanzer's fucking authorization. He just braked the other mags and cut the power was all. The worst part's the stop, I can tell you that. They go on and switch you guys. They go on and switch you guys, or is somebody going to tell me what they did, or what? Deck had had considerably more than one beer. Not a happy drunk, but direct. "Yeah, they switched us. Damn right they did." At which Deck looked at Ben, and Meg recognized it was a good thing Sal came back with the beers. Deck asked, "Why in hell didn't you tell me?" Ben took his beer, and Meg held her breath. Ben said, "Because they could have said no deal, and you already knew." "I didn't know." "Yes, you did. Give me arms comp, hell. I don't want the guns. Why'd they give me the guns? I'm a numbers man. So Sal said, 'Want a trade?' And I said, 'You friggin' got it. Give me the comp and I'll get you the fire tracks.'" "Bullshit, Ben." Deck's voice wobbled of a sudden. "What are they going to do about it then?" Like, like he didn't know. Like he hadn't told her in a couple of minutes during which Like he hadn't told her in a couple of minutes during which Corporal Bloomfield had been calling the hospital, checking on Jamil. "Come on, Cher." Sal squatted down with her beer and patted Deck on the knee. "Screw the regs. Ben's the numbers. Ben's always been the numbers." Ben said, "Arms comp and long scans integrated boards. What's the difference who's punching up and who's punching in? They ran a they ran a switched as a pair, didn't have an iota of trouble with the sim. Sal's got to, Sal's got to get the feel for the ordnance, but she's on it." "It's not a free lunch, Ben." "Close at. It's not a free lunch, Ben." "Close as. I got my hands on that system, Deck boy. I got a system runs like it's friggin' elegant." Ben was in serious lust. Deck looked at him. Deck was going to hit him, Meg thought, poised to grab. But Deck didn't. Sudden quiet from the ping-pong match.
rapid fall-off of noise from the door inward, and she looked, where, God, it was UDC uniforms incoming, senior guys, and the lieutenant was with them. Guys were coming to their feet. They did. They did. Villanueva, Deck murmured. The redoubted Captain Villy, then. At your ease, Graff said. Official voice, that. Something, sure as hell, was up. Nobody moved. Personal message first, Graff said. Jamil says he's coming back. Says he and Dekker are in a race. Flyby was a show out, but God, that was good news. He was no cheap write-off, and neither was his crew. Cheers at that. Cheers at that. A faint laugh out of Deck. As you know, Graff continued, the mag interfaces took damage in shutdown. Repair crews can handle that. But the larger question is what caused the pod to hang, and we are not putting crews back into the moving sims until we can pinpoint a cause and ensure operational safety. This does not, however, mean the program is at stand down. Whole room must be breathing in unison, Meg thought. Good on everything they'd heard so far, but there were the UDC uniforms. Just hope to God they aren't putting us back under Tanzer. Lab sims will continue as scheduled. We also have made a selection of fleet crews for a carrier operations exercise. Test run, Dekker muttered at her side. Translation from a lot of sources to the same effect. Starting within the hour. Quiet settled. Quickly. In the meanwhile, we are taking steps to integrate fleet and the UDC instructional and operational personnel. You will see UDC personnel in fleet areas, eventually in barracks, on which matter I want to say something specific. Rising murmur of dismay. The lieutenant waited, frowning. There was an incident reported to me, out of rec hall, an attempt from a UDC crew to meet this company halfway, which was reciprocated with good grace. As a pilot myself, I appreciate the criticality of operational confidence in fellow personnel. Let's be blunt. Confidence of that kind was a casualty of the Wilhelmsen run. But what went wrong with this program does not serve this program. And when you're heads up and hands on, what doesn't serve this program doesn't serve you or the carrier you're defending. I don't have to spell out to you the reality for the future, that you will be working with UDC crews, whose lives will be equally at risk, including the lives of personnel aboard your carrier. Competition is well and good where it brings out extreme effort. But the relationship between the 4 core crew members of this ship will be extended eventually to the complete 30-member support team aboard, who will rely on core crew. In the same way, a carrier's 4 Hellburner crews will have to rely on each other, and on that carrier and its internal support crew for survival. There is no more serious business. Those of us from merchanter background have never quarreled with your style or your customs, and we refuse to quarrel with the personal customs of our sister service out of the inner system. Whatever makes a crew work is that unit's business and only their business. That's the position we've always taken. That's the position we expect you to take now, because when you're out there in the wide dark, friends, your personal style, and whether you're from Sol's inner or outer system, doesn't make a damn bit of difference. The reliance you have on the crews making up your defensive envelope, that's all you've got. Those are your brothers and your sisters, and the uniform will not matter. Murmur from the barracks. Worried murmur. Graff cut it off with, "The names of the pilots," and got instant quiet. Of the 3 crews selected, given alphabetically, Almarshad, Dekker, Mitchell. Those crews pack immediately and board ECS-4 within the hour. Your quarters in this barracks will remain in your name, sacrosanct. You have no mass limit for this particular run. The carrier's engines will not notice your hand weights or your case of soft drinks, for that matter. But remember that all electronics aboard must be listed with the duty officer, and alcohol and medications of any sort must be dispensed by carrier staff only. Other crews will keep listed schedules. That's all, guys. Have a good evening. We'll have a further briefing after breakfast call. Lieutenant, Mitch called out. Is that as in test flight? It's as in keeping this program going, Mr. Mitchell. You'll get more specific briefings after you're aboard. That's all I can tell you now. I won't be making this trip. You'll be under the orders of Commander Edmund Porey, specifically. Goodbye, good luck, good outcome. Porey, Sal breathed. What in hell are they doing? Ben muttered, which was what she was thinking. They're crazed, Deck said, and called out, Lieutenant! Started across the room. And stopped, still, arms at his sides, just stopped, for no reason she could see. The lieutenant was still standing there, looking straight at him, with a worried expression. But Deck didn't ask his question, and the lieutenant didn't give his answer. Shit, Sal said, and went for Deck before she had the brains to. What? Oh, shit, Sal said, and went for Deck before she had the brains to, as Graff walked out with Villanueva, and guys were coming up and accosting her and Sal and Ben with congratulations. Noisy and excited gatherings around Almarshad and Mitch and their guys. Speculation flying. Upbeat. The whole program had crashed on them, and now everything was moving faster than anyone thought. Deck? She got his attention, and he looked sane. Sane and a little shaken. Ben overtook and said, What are we doing in this sort out? We have to pack, Deck said for an answer, which meant, to an old company hand, we can't discuss it here. Another time glitch. The station's smooth, pale surfaces to the carrier's Spartan corridors, foam steel and color codes, lights that worked only when there was a presence, hand lines rigged every which way, and deja vu on every surface. The rigging crew had been kind enough to supply a hand line with a color cue, and Dekker followed it, herding the duffel along, the head of his little column, Mitchell's group and Almarshad's. Long, long way from the entry to the rider loft. The lifts wouldn't take them where they wanted to go. What? The lifts wouldn't take them where they wanted to go so long as the carrier core was crashed, and the rules wouldn't let you do minor tricks. Not on Porey's ship. He had that by experience. You slogged it the hard way and expected sore arms. Ship's officer was ahead. Check-in point. Welcome aboard, they got, and a copy apiece of the ship's internal regs, and the standard information on alcohol, volatiles, explosives, electronics, and live animals or plants. Inner perimeter, take hold for power up, rang out on the speakers. Inner perimeter didn't mean them, which he knew, but not everyone seemed sure of on the instant. Not everyone seemed sure of that. There is no that. It's just sure of on the instant. Which he knew, but not everyone seemed sure of on the instant. And the petty officer said, Corps going to engage for you. You can take the lift. Captain's compliments. Captain's compliments. He took a breath, exchanged glances with his crew, thinking, bloody hell. Because extravagant gestures from Porey were highly suspect. The man liked causing pain. He'd met what he'd taken for examples of the type, but cheap talent compared with Porey's position and intelligence and potential. He didn't want to be on this ship. He didn't want to be under Porey's command, even feeling as he did now that Porey was a competent commander. He knew in his mind that they were aboard for security reasons, not because of the test. And they weren't mission candidates. He'd said as much to his crew in the privacy of their quarters. But the way this was starting out, this move on Porey's part, Porey was in games mode. You bet your life on your nerves and your skill, and they had Porey jinking like this to start with, yanking them out, putting UDC into barracks when he damned well knew they were worried about UDC security? A dozen guys with combat nerves trained to deal with this kind of thing, and what in hell was Porey up to, making maneuvers on the ones trying to make his program work? Snake, he thought as he punched the lift call. It's politics. It's damned stinking politics. That's what this smells like. He's afraid I'll talk. He wants me where he can control calm, where I can have another accident if it comes to that. Man'll do anything. Nothing in him you can get hold of. Nothing gets to his eyes except when people squirm. He enjoyed it this morning, when he knew he'd got a hit in, and I hadn't done anything. He's that kind. The siren blasted the 30-second warning. Surreal sound, one he'd heard a handful of times in his life, when he'd ridden out from the belt. Hell of a surprise, Almarshad muttered. Nobody sets foot on this carrier but the commander's own staff. What any of us have heard, not even the lieutenant. Don't they trust each other, or what? Almarshad wasn't thinking about surveillance. Wilson wasn't, either, who said, "Wish the lieutenant was going," as if Porey wouldn't eavesdrop. Dekker felt a cold fear, of a sudden, that not all of them might come back down this particular lift again. Mitch's crew, and Almarshad's, the mission team, and the backup. That was the order of things he could see, and he had a sudden claustrophobic sense he couldn't go through with this, couldn't watch this, couldn't stand another watch-in mission. Whoops. Couldn't watch this, couldn't stand another watch in mission control while something went wrong. The deck vibrated with the engagement of the core. The lift door opened to let them in. Motion instead of thinking. A moment of dumping thoughts and negotiating the door, null G. He got himself and his crew and their baggage in with two other teams, grabbed the take-hold in the corner next to the lift controls and stared at the panel, read the instruction and warning stickers on monofocus, and didn't blink, because he could lose himself right now, lose where he was, and when this was, and what he had to do. G increasing. "Hold on," he said, as the indicator approached the loft exit. The car hit the interface, jolted into lock with the personnel cylinder. The door opened. Wood and sleek plastic. Carpeted burn deck. Looked like the Shepherd Club on R2. Like exec officers. Like exec offices. "My God," Meg breathed at his back. "Is this us or Porey's cabin?" "It's us," he said in shock. "It's evidently us." Wasn't real wood, it was synth, but it was good synth. There was a tended bar, an orderly with trays of food and null-capped liquor. There were more orderlies to take their duffels and carry them away. "Shit," came from Sal. And Ben, "Class stuff here." Reality was completely slipping on him. He gave up his baggage to the orderly who'd caught a look at his name tag and took the duffel away. No wide spaces, the whole huge loft was diced up into safer, smaller spaces, by what he could see from his vantage. It hadn't been like this the last time he'd been aboard. Bare girders on the ECS-5. No paneling, no carpet, no interior walls, and no orderly with cheese and crackers and marguerites and martinis. The Shepherds were right in their element. Mitch said, "All right," and moved right in on the bar. And Ben didn't blink. Ben had been living the soft life on Sol 1. Meg and Sal had been with the Shepherds. But he hadn't. This wasn't real. Not for him. It wasn't ever supposed to be for him. There were people who had luxuries and people who didn't have, by some rule of the universe, and he couldn't see himself in a place like this. "As you were," Porey's voice, deep and live. He looked around at the outer corridor entry as the commander walked in. Porey strolled past Mitch to the bar and picked up a cheese and cracker, popped it in his mouth. Nobody moved. Nobody thought to salute. It was too bizarre, watching Porey walk a tour of the very quiet area. We had a problem. We still have a problem, gentlemen. Ladies. We have Sims down. Again. We have one of our best teams down. Again. This wasn't your fault. Fixing it, unfortunately, is your responsibility. Seeing you have time and opportunity to focus on the job at hand is mine. I've pulled you out here, and I am pulling this carrier out of station. Our final Hellburner prototype is mated to the frame. We're proceeding with deliberate speed. We've advised the necessary powers that there will be a test, and we are, frankly, using the time to make our final selection. 3 units will be using traditional lab sims, which we can manage aboard this ship, and using sims in the actual prototype, daily, shift after shift. Mr. Dekker's unit will be using something different in addition, which we are watching and evaluating. Selection will be solely on the basis of scores and medical evaluations. Alcohol is not a prohibition during this watch. It will be available from time to time as schedules permit, but I suggest you not have a hangover in the morning. Schedule will start with orientation to the library, the loft, the prototype. About which, remember, you people are the best of the best. A carrier's survival and the accomplishment of its objectives is in large part your mission. You will live very well here, as you can see. Core crews and technicians will occupy these quarters, with adequate staff to assure your undivided attention to your duty, which is solely the operation of your craft, the protection of your carrier, and the achieving of strategic and tactical objectives. Additionally, privilege is extended in special facilities to your maintenance personnel, your library research technicians, and your communications and analysis personnel. You will sit at the top of a pyramid of some 700 staff and crew, with information gathering and processing facilities interfaced and cross-checked with the nerve center of the carrier itself. Everything you need. Anything you reasonably request. And, yes, tactical and targeting decisions will be part of your responsibility, in consultation with the captain of this ship. You will learn to make those decisions in close cooperation with carrier staff, decisions which were not, until now, your responsibility. Command believes your expertise in gravity-bound interactions and object location is an invaluable resource, and you will no longer receive cut-and-dried mission profiles. You will construct them yourselves. This is a policy change reflecting a change in the source of policy. How long we can maintain that control of policy rests directly on your successful completion of this mission. In the meanwhile, enjoy yourselves. Ask the staff for anything within reason, and consult your individual data cards for further briefings. The second half of the cracker and cheese. Porey walked slowly toward the exit, and stopped. Enjoy yourselves, gentlemen. Ladies. Scared hell out of a guy. Porey, as Meg would put it, doing courtesy. Shit. Ben said, closing ranks with him and Meg, and Sal said, close after, so that's Porey up close. That's Porey, Dekker said. Polite, Shelavek, Meg said. Nice place and all. You wouldn't ever think it, would you? Son of a bitch. A massacre. A slaughter of the innocent. Graff braced his finger against his lips, watched the vid in dismay, the crowd, the piecers shouting. The blonde woman with the stringing hair looking distractedly left and right over the crowd like something trapped. Reporters asked, "Is your son the model they're basing this tape on? Are you in communication with him?" Ingrid Dekker shook her head in bewilderment, saying, "I don't know. I don't have anything to do with him. Nothing he did has anything to do with me. It's never had anything to do with me." God. He sat there, watching the alien scene. Steps of some ornate building, a cathedral, they said, in London, the placards and banners, the sheer mass of human beings. "A bas la campagne!" they were yelling. Down with the EC. And elsewhere on Earth's life-rich surface, a UDC spokesman was claiming that the attitudes of the RAB movement were infiltrating the fleet, that the real aim was to disarm Earth's local forces, that the Earth Company was attempting to use the fleet and the whole construction push in the belt to take political control of the UDC and establish a world dictatorship. Disaster. Utter political disaster. The tape is the damning thing. Someone's given out details. Someone in a position to know what we're doing. Saito said, "Don't discount Tanzer. The UDC has these records at their disposal. A lot of damaging data. We had to accept the UDC structure in place, and after the takeover, we knew it was a bomb waiting to go off." "What side are they on, Com, for God's sake? Do they think it's a bloody game we're playing?" "Their power is in question. Their sight has unquestionably shortened. They'll question whether or not they're in control of the EC or whether the EC is in control of Earth's policy. It's a very large, a very sensitive issue in this system. The EC has enormous power, a constituency spread over the stations and the refineries and worlds outside this system. And we outsiders only know the EC. But there are governments, many governments on Earth, that consider the situation out there solely the EC's war." "But it is the EC's war. Do any of us doubt it's the EC's war? The EC's cursed immigration restrictions created the mess. They motivated the dissidents to move out. They insisted on micromanaging at light's distance. Every stupid decision they ever compromised their way into created this war. But the fact is, something very foreign is coming here. That's the point. They're worried about tape trading off a RAB model because the RAB movement is foreign? The RAB isn't ASI. The RAB isn't designed personalities. The RAB isn't an expansion into space so remote we don't know what may come out of it or what in hell they're going to provoke. Belters are foreign? They should worry about me, Com. I'm foreign. I'm more alien than anything they've ever met." "Maybe they do worry. Maybe that's what that mob in Geneva is really saying. Give us back our control over things. Make it stop. Make it the way we always thought it was." It never was. Not for one moment was the universe the way they imagined. Of course it wasn't. But they thought they knew. They thought they controlled it all. Now they know they don't. And that poor woman is the symbol of their outrage. Alice Salazar has to be the EC's greatest internal liability. Why in hell do they go on letting her take the offensive? Principally because Mars wants its independence. Because Mars has gotten quite different, quite alien from Earth. That's what I've turned up on the Salazars. Cytenization? Something like. Something like the Belt, with nostalgic conservatism as the engine, instead of the radical reform that drove the RAB to the Belt. They cling to an Earth that never existed. They're the pure article, more earther than Earth is, maintaining the true opinion, the true earthly tradition. Never mind the outbackers are as eccentric as they come. The corporate management runs the government, quite conservative, quite protective of their personal interests and their family influence. I thought that was illegal. It is, but it's the driving force in Martian society. Who's in whose camp? Understanding what the daughter's desertion meant to Alice Salazar. Simplistically, face-saving has to be a large part of her motive, by what we've turned up. The girl escaped her mother's authority by literally slipping through customs and eluding her mother's personal security. That was one blow to the Salazar corporate image. That was one blow to the Salazar corporate image. More extravagantly, she embarrassed her mother by dying, quite publicly, quite firmly associated with Belter Rab in a full-scale company disaster. The daughter was clearly a dynastic hope on her part, a bid to extend Salazar's influence into another generation. A lot of Salazar alliances were built on that assumption, which had to be revised at the daughter's death. Which, to a Martian corporate, was a major disaster, a threat to her immediate control. It's radicalized the Salazar influence. She's, certain people think calculatedly, offended certain elements that oppose the company. The consensus I'm getting from intelligence is she's not mad. She calculatedly created a cause and an opposition to force the EC itself down her path in a move to come out of this more powerful than she was. That's what we're dealing with. She's maneuvering for power equal to the EC president. And the EC so far is paralyzed because of who's backing her. They can't betray the conservatives in Bonn, or it erodes a structure they've built up over decades. The conservatives there are in fear for their lives over the radical resurgence. And that promotes company hardliners like Bertrand Muller. Muller is for the war, incidentally. He wants us to recover Cytine. My God. He calls it a colony. What do you want? He's 90 years old. He formed his current opinion on his 40th birthday, and he says the company police who fired on the Rab were defending civilized values. We're in the hands of financiers. No. Damn it, I muffed the punchline now! No, not like this! We're in the hands of lunatics. Of financiers. Far worse. So, as you'll recognize, the political situation is a little bit familiar. People setting policy are a bunch of octogenarian shrivs who are so completely out of touch with reality and haven't been in touch with reality for literally half a century. And they're the ones who set policy and tell us, the people, what the hell we're doing and how to live our lives. Where's our rap movement? We don't want that because that involves us getting shot. That would have been Walk on Wall Street if there had been like jackbooted thugs that gunned everyone down. Um, so yeah, some things never change. They really don't. Alrighty, so yeah, the thrilling climax is pretty much here. We're in the immediate lead up. There's gonna be like the climax is gonna be like within, I don't know, probably 15 pages of the end of the book, to be honest. She leaves certain things to the absolute last minute. Um, oh my gosh, the climax of Cytine is completely bonkers. Like you've had slow burn, extreme. Like what's the slowest burning thing you can think of? It's something that burns very, very slowly for like I don't know, better part of 1,000 pages, like 700 pages worth of slow burn, but building constantly up to inexorably what winds up being the climax of that book. And then it's like, bam, right at the very end, book over. And it's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That was intense. A lot just went down very quickly. Um, I love CJ Cherryh. She's so much fun to read. So much fun to read. So yeah, hope people are digging it. I'm sorry about
I, I appreciate everybody who tolerates me getting all tongue-tied and mangling cadences, because some of these sentences are just absolutely massive, massive sentences. The brothers Karamazov. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, sorry. Give me a second. Oh, I'm dying. You got me. You got me. You got me. Yes. Yes. Thank you. AE optical antenna. Yes. 100%. The brothers Karamazov. Oh, buddy, yes. So yeah, um glad people are digging it. If people are digging it, presumably they are. They wouldn't tune in if they weren't. Right? 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 Right. Anything you have to say to convince yourself. So yeah, one more installment. So get prepped for that for next week. Um, After next week, how many weeks am I gonna have actually? Let me double check here. Let me look at my calendar here. Okay, yeah, yeah, I'll have 1 week of like short stories or something. Part of me also wants to do like, yeah, spent most of my time reading that, looking up names in my crib notes. Yeah, yup, yup, yes, yes, exactly. No, as soon as you printed it, I was like, yes, that, that is an excellent example. Oh my goodness. Read the Brothers Karamazov. That's a hell of a book. That's literature up in there. But yeah, I, I'm not debating like massive changes to the format. I've already experimented with doing like comic book stuff. My main difficulty with doing comic book stuff is I don't have a significant digital archive at all to work from. Um, I suppose I could like wrangle something, get like a subscription to Comixology or something, and try and work with their interface and see how I can stream that. But that's kind of the difficulty, and it's a very different format. But I've got a bunch of cool graphic novels and such that I'd love to share because they're awesome. Um, Even though the one I shared is like really bad, like I adore it. Like I don't know, uncomfortable fascination with with the movie Aliens or something. But I liked reading Aliens Outbreak. It was fun. But yeah, probably some short stories ripped from like I don't know, Astounding Science Fiction or Interzone or something. I'll figure it out. But next week will be the end of the book, the final installment of the book. And then I've got like at least 4 books that I've got like lined up that I'm looking at, thinking, hey, these ones would be cool to read. I'm actually going through one right now that I hadn't read in years called The Quick by Bert Cole because I was like, oh, isn't this like a action hero, actiony book? Where a guy, it's kind of like if you did, I don't know, Big Boss, uh, from Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid 3, and then made him like by way of like what's it called? What is the name of that movie? Wolverines, where Russia invades October something. Not Red October. It's Red Dawn. There we go. It's basically like yeah, yeah, Red Dawn. Yep. Russia invades the mainland U.S. and a bunch of teenagers out in like Montana or whatever fight them off uh, jihadi style in the or not jihadi style but mujahideen style in the hills of the Rocky Mountains. Um, that's a corny movie. I haven't seen that. I say corny. It's a fun movie. It's cute. It's a nice little snapshot of the zeitgeist at the time. Um, but the book is kind of like that, where America is in shambles, except it's us doing it to ourselves. It's not Russia invading. And this guy is like a, you know, super soldier extraordinaire who's like been doing mercenary stuff forever, and then he shows back up to get involved. It's a satire. The book is a satire, but it's kind of like not especially funny. Like there are bits where it's like, haha, that's a funny scene, but then you remember the content of the scene. You're like, actually, that's pretty bleak. As much good satire is. Some of the best satire is not funny. It is like, wow, that's bleak. That's dark. And this is fairly dark. It'd be pushing the boundaries for me in terms of reading stuff. Like I've read lots of pretty vile shit. Like I've read Ayn Rand, okay? Like I've read some vile shit in my day. Not to put too fine a point on it. Aha! The Fountainhead. What the fuck? Hell, Atlas Shrugged even. Fountainhead is worse. Setting that aside, I've read some vile things. This book is edgier than most of the stuff I tend to have read here. I've read moderately edgy things. Peter Watts is fairly edgy, mostly for the implications. That's kind of one of the things that keeps me from reading the Starfish trilogy or Rifters trilogy by Peter Watts is there's a lot of edge later on. It's really edgy. And I'm like, I don't necessarily want to read that guy out loud being a complete psycho killer, doing horrible things to people's bodies. I don't know if I really want to read that. Gravity's Rainbow? Which is Gravity's Rainbow? I'm having a brain fart. Oh, Pinchong. Yeah, that'd do it. That'd do it. I don't think I've actually ever read that. I know the author. I have not actually read that, I don't think. If I have read it, it was so long ago that I don't remember, which is not impossible. Because if I read it, it was probably back in the place I used to live, like 20 years ago. Nah, it'd be more than 20 years. What have I read by Pinchon, though? That's the question. Now I don't know. Maybe it was V. I don't remember. It's been a long time. Yeah, Pinchon does that. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Thomas Pynchon's name there properly. I don't know that I've ever heard it aloud. Uh, I know I don't have any of his books anymore. If I did, no, I think most of my stuff I just borrowed from the library. Incidentally, support your local library. Fairly important. So yeah, like I've I a lot of the stuff I read is not strictly PG-13. Like I'd put a lot of it over the edge, maybe to border like Blind Sight. It's really hard to justify Blind Sight as a PG-13 work, um, because a there's a lot of profanity. Not that I care, uh, but b there's also like it's fairly grim stuff. Remind me to find the story. Oh gosh, that one's good. So Peter Watts occasionally has a blog that he occasionally posts to, and several years back, um, apparently a teacher had gotten in communication with him in order to have Blind Sight assigned as class reading, and I've read that aloud. If you want to check that out, I recommend it. I think the book is rad. You can also read it for free online. That's another thing. If I do get around to doing Starfish, you can read that entire trilogy online. It is free. And I'm not saying that like, oh, you can get it for free. No, no, it's actually covered by the thing that's name I just completely forgot because I have a tiny brain. Rifters.com. What are you called? Backlist. What do you call it? Yes. Yes. Creative Commons. Attribution. Non-commercial. Share alike 2.5 generic. CC by NC SA 2.5. So you can read all of those. This is Peter Watts' stuff. Uh, he's got a lot of his stuff is up, and it's under Creative Commons, which I think is super cool. I'm 100% behind that. Um, and in fact, doing that means I'm going to seek out a book and buy it because, like, I want to support that idea. Although the difficulty then becomes you're probably getting the book secondhand, and therefore the money isn't actually going to him. But you see the dilemma. In any case, what time is it? I'm done rambling for today. Suffice it to say, next week will be the last installment in Hellburner. Hope people are enjoying it. I will almost certainly read more CJ Cherryh on the stream. Um, it may not be for a while, but it will happen. Uh, hope people are digging it. If you're not digging it, shall we? If you are digging it, cool. If you're tolerating me mangling long, long sentences with all the punctuation, I'm sorry when I interrupt myself midway through because I'll never like if I don't, I'll never remember. This passage was crazy, and you need to hear how this was divvied up. I will never remember. Okay, I've rambled enough. It's really hard talking out loud, making a spiel when you have no idea if there's an audience there. Um, even though I know you're here, thank you. When you can't see and interact with an audience easily, there's like the time lag. It's weird. Okay. So yeah, I gotta run. Thanks for tuning in. See you all next week. And yeah, stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. And if you can, don't be like Commander Porey. He's kind of a dick. It's a lot of a dick. He's that's the guy's like borderline psychopath territory. Alrighty, see y'all.